In this leadership series, the Hangar Z Podcast meets with LAPD Chief Jim McDonnell to explore his law enforcement journey, leadership insights, and the power of community-focused policing.
Leadership is really, whatever opportunity you're given to do the little things which add up to the big things. You may have something, come your way that is highly publicized and you're recognized for leadership in some circumstance. But leadership is the day-to-day, is dealing with the people. It's a people business. Dealing with people in a way that's respectful, that's motivational, that it's respectful of who they are and what they bring to the table, and to show gratitude to them for what they do.
Welcome to the Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. John Gray and I are really fortunate to have so many great guests join us on the podcast. That trend continues today, but with a unique twist to it. At the time of the recording, our guest was retired after 40 plus years in law enforcement. Most of that experience was in leadership positions. We also knew that day that our guest had put his hat in the ring for a very important law enforcement chief position. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass recently announced that Jim McDonnell was the 59th Chief of Police for the LAPD. The Hangar Z would like to congratulate Chief Jim McDonnell. We are thrilled to have him on the podcast. Thank you to our sponsors, Summit Aviation,
Quantum Helicopters,
and Airbus.
Welcome to the Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. The Hangar Z Podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like you're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, through the shotgun, through something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
We're in a tough place in America right now relative to policing. But I think it's a time of great opportunity as well, because it's a chance for us to be able to, I think the police profession has been humbled in the last couple of years, which if we turn that into a positive as we move forward, I think we can capitalize on that as far as refocusing on values, refocusing on what's important, making sure the appropriate guardrails are in place so that our behavior is what the public expects it to be, what all of us as professionals expect it to be. But also then I think the public is starting to see that the moves that have been put in place post-2020 were not effective, were not something that ended up with desirable results for communities, particularly the more challenged communities across our nation. And so I think as we move forward with the recent realization that things have to change, things have to be made better than they are, but going back again to lessons learned in the past and not throwing out one model when we adopt another, that we can't do it on our own. We can't possibly do it. We have to work collaboratively with our public safety partners, but we have to work with the communities that we serve, because without community support, we can't possibly be effective. But with community support, we can do a tremendous amount with even with limited resources.
Where did you go from there?
I made captain from there and went to Southwest Division.
Okay.
And in South Los Angeles, again, I enjoyed that very much. That was a great command. Sadly, right after I got there, or not long after I got there, we had one of our police officers, crash officers, Phil Cuesta, ambushed and murdered. And that, as you can imagine, the impact that had on the workplace and on the people who work there, on the community. Tremendous support from the community during that time. Everybody rallied and unified at that time internally. But very, very sad. Two young kids, a young wife at the time, and a great guy by all accounts, doing the best job he could. Yep. And tragic loss of life there, but something that shaped that division for years to come.
It did,
and still August 9th, 1998, it occurred. Every year, the people who worked with Phil during the time of that tragic incident come back with the family and commemorate his contributions to the field and remember.
That's amazing. I mean, I'm aware of that, and And I wasn't aware of it for a long time. And then George Gonzalez told me about that. And he was the sergeant at scene.
Yeah.
And that's amazing that they do that. I'm so happy they do that. That's good for them. It's good for the family. That was a bad one. They're all bad, but that one, wow, it really hit. I did a lot of hours of flying over that perimeter. That was quite an incident. But I'm just, again, it's nice that they do that. It doesn't happen all the time.
Right.
It should.
Yeah. That was a special group of people in that unit that bonded through the incident, but then never let it go. And I mean that in a positive way. Yeah, that's 25. Last year was 25 years, and they still remember it with kind of a remembrance, a plaque at the station in the rear of the station as well.
Good.
From there, I went to training. Spent about a year in training. My office was at the old academy, which to me was hallowed ground. And I think that so many years before I had been there as a new recruit who didn't know where I was going. And just trying to figure out, what was next, and then to be back there as the captain was truly a privilege, and I felt it was a place of honor. From there, I went back to Parker Center Management Services Division as captain there. Spent some time there, and ultimately made commander, and was assigned to put together the International Association of Chiefs of Police Conference, which was going to be coming our way in 2004. And so I got that off the ground. I was replaced down the road with another commander who then took over that. We put on the event, and it was probably the best that I've ever seen. We did a tactical display on the street with PD and LA sheriffs. It was something right out of Hollywood.
It was.
We had chiefs there. We had probably 17 or 18,000 chiefs from all over the world, and they were standing on Figueroa Street outside the hotel, the Bonaventure Hotel, right down the street, and a tactical air display, fast roping, SWAT officers on the ground taking down suspect vehicles, and it was done in a way where everybody was just shaking their head. Only in LA.
Yeah,
and that was a very proud time for our organization, and the collaboration with the LA Sheriff's Department as well. I think that was a good message that was received well by everybody.
Yeah, they were great. I was involved in that demo, and the sheriffs were fantastic. I mean, at that point they provided the fast rope airframe, and right at the Bonaventure. That was great. I mean, it was one of two times that I got to fly a helicopter down between the buildings, and I'll tell you what, that was a rush. I'll never forget that. It was great.
It's interesting as we go through this, and we're talking about my career and where I was. How many of the things I've mentioned that you were also there? And LAPD is a big department, but it's not that big, and you get to know the players, and your paths cross pretty frequently, actually. And so
they do.
Relationships are everything. Having a good network is everything, and that's really part of the fun of the whole thing.
It is.
Yeah,
it is. And it's funny too, because you mentioned that, and it is so big, but yet I had classmates that I graduated with that I never saw again.
Yeah.
And you never in 32 years, never saw them again. Read about them, they promoted or they did this, but our paths never crossed again. And people look at me when I tell them that and go, "You're kidding." I go, "No, it's a big place." But yet you did cross paths with certain people in certain aspects, and it's kind of a bizarre thing. A big department is very unique in that way.
Yeah. From there, I became special assistant, I think was the title at the time, but it was working with deputy chief, and we oversaw what at the time was the CompStat system. We had a different name for it, Fast Track at the time, but it was bringing CompStat to Los Angeles and drilling down on that for command accountability. That was CompStat, Fast Track, whatever it was called, wherever it was done well in some places and not as well in others, but it got refined over the years, and hopefully it's still being used in a way that is productive, where people are held accountable for performance outcomes, but outcomes and not just numbers. And I think it's too easy to measure numbers, arrest FIs, or whatever it is we're looking at. But are you getting any results, or are you just getting numbers? Is it busy work to show productivity? And I think we need to be more focused, particularly with limited resources, on outcomes rather than outputs. And I think that a word of caution that for those who are overseeing CompStat in by whatever name it's given, the focus needs to be on what is the impact ultimately to the community, and not just are we busy? Are we doing things to show that we're productive?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And then from there, I competed for chief of police. That was 2002. I did better in the process than I ever thought I would, but I felt that I was in a place where I was not satisfied with the way things were. I was several levels down from the chief of police, but if I was not happy and all of my people I worked with were not satisfied with the way things were going, and we felt we could do it better, then it was time to kind of, put up or stay quiet about it. And so I put my hat in the ring, and ultimately then Bill Bratton ended up getting the job and made me his number 2 first assistant chief. And we worked together in that capacity for about 7.5 years, and then put in for it again. And at that time, got down to the final 3, and the mayor gets to pick whichever one of the 3, and Mayor Villaraigosa at the time picked Charlie Beck, and Charlie went in and did a good job. And at that point, Long Beach PD opened up, and I went down and spoke with the city manager, and ultimately was allowed into the process, and then became chief for about 5 years at Long Beach. Enjoyed that very much. Fast-paced city, very tightly deployed, not a lot of personnel, but people who really worked hard and did a good job.
How many officers does Long Beach have? I mean, I know it's different day to day now, but approximately.
Yeah, when I went there, just before I was there, they had 1,004. When I left there, they had 802. Yeah. We dropped 20% because of the budget, 20% of our staff, but we reduced crime by 40%. So in going to the city council and trying to make the case that we need more police officers, they said, look at your numbers. You don't need more police officers.
Exactly. You're doing such a good job. We're not going to give you any more.
Yeah, we had some great people working hard, but we were a victim of our own success in that case. And sadly, now they're down in the high 600s, and it's very, very lean today. So hopefully they'll be able to rebound there and have the sufficient funding to be able to fill academy classes and get back up to their authorized strength. And while I was in Long Beach, I had been reached out to by a member of the Board of Supervisors, Don Kanabi, and he said, hey, I need a favor. Would you sit on a commission to look at the Sheriff's Department? It's the Commission on Jail Violence. And I said, you know what, I got a lot going here. I'm on a national commission looking at children exposed to violence, a task force, and I'm doing some travel for that. So I said, it's not a great time. He says, I really need you to do this. They have a number of great people, retired federal judges, but they don't have anybody from the policing world. And you could come in and have a perspective that would be valuable. And I said, I can't say no to that. And I did it. And I went in and I heard accounts and testimony from over the course of a year from deputies, custody assistants, chaplains, physicians, prior inmates, people. You go through the list of clergy, people who had interactions there, and the accounts I heard were very troubling of pay to play, of brutality in some cases, of things that none of us would be proud of, and most of the people in the sheriff's office were not proud of. But it had been going on for some period of time. And I felt odd having grown up next door to the department, but not being aware of the things that were happening inside. So we did that. We issued a report with 63 recommendations for change, and I was hopeful that that would have a positive impact. And I had been approached by a number of people at the time to run for sheriff. And I said, you know what? I sat on this to try and affect some positive change. We've done the report. Let's see what the department does with the report. My goal was never to run for sheriff or to be a member of that organization. I always wore blue and had a different mindset than the duties of the sheriff. And we watched for a year, and in that year, there were I think close to 20 members of the department federally indicted. for various charges, and ultimately resulting in the imprisonment of the sheriff, the undersheriff, and some others. Very, very tough time for the organization. A year later, I had been approached again. Would you reconsider? And I think some people felt that it needed to be an outsider, but an outsider with some knowledge of what was going on inside. And I think the belief was that, having sat on that task force for a year, that I had some insight that I wouldn't have otherwise had, which I believe was the case. So I took it on again. One of those things where you're apprehensive about doing it, but it's the right thing to do ultimately. And so I threw my hat in the ring. I had never run for anything in my life. And LA is a big county, and you have to raise a lot of money. And I really do not like asking people for money for anything. Fundraising was probably the hardest part of that whole effort from my perspective. But once I threw in, I was all in, and I was still working in Long Beach. I wouldn't give up that job because I felt I owed it to the people of Long Beach to do the job as well as I could, and then to run on my off hours. And there was little sleep during that period. I would change cars. I would, have drive my police car to work, and then at the end of the day, have my personal car and drive to Lancaster, Palmdale, Pomona, somewhere.
Oh my gosh!
Any group of people that were together, I would talk to them about what my platform was, what I believed the needs of the organization were, raise money along the way as well. And it was very, very instructive. I learned an awful lot from that process that I never would have learned had I not gone into it. I have an appreciation for elected officials and what they have to go through. And so ultimately was elected sheriff. And then the 4 years I had in that department were very difficult 4 years in a number of ways, but some of the best 4 years of my policing career, in the ability to be able to affect change in a positive way, to be able to work with others to achieve a common goal, to be able to work with electeds. And there's 88 cities in LA County. 42 of them are contract cities policed by the Sheriff's Department. So the need to work closely with all of our partners was never more critical than it was in that job. And that's without mutual aid issues or anything else to talk about, in which you have to work very closely. The sheriff is in charge of putting all of that together, or was at the time. And so when I look back on it, the relationships, the network, the friendships, the challenges, all of the things that come together in a police executive position all came together there. When I look at what LAPD or Long Beach PD does as their core mission, it's what we all think about, patrol, investigative follow-up, counterterrorism, the myriad of different things that any police agency does. The Sheriff's Department does all of those as well for the unincorporated areas throughout the county, as well as for the 42 contract cities. But they also then, with roughly the same number of sworn personnel as LAPD, they also have responsibility for the jails, the courts, the colleges, the hospitals, the parks, search and rescue, and spread out over 10 times the size of the city of Los Angeles. It's about 4,700 square miles, the county. And so when you look at that, you think, how in God's name do they get this job done with the number of people they have? And there's a work ethic there that allows them to be able to do that, maximize their resources. But it is a very difficult job that I don't think people appreciate until you sit in that chair and realize just how vast the county is, both from a standpoint of size, the 4,700 square miles, 11 million people throughout the county, and the number of agencies you have to work with, the number of elected officials. Every city has a mayor, a city council. Most of them have a city manager, and you've got 42 of them that you work with. And we had great relationships.
It's unbelievable.
We're able to get a lot done there. But then all the other cities, the sheriff's office plays a role in something that is involved in their cities as well.
Thanks to our sponsor, Summit Aviation, a full-service provider for business, government, parapublic, and military aviation, specializing in maintenance, modifications, avionics, interiors, and paint. Discover more at summit-aviation.com.
And so I look back on that as I could not have paid for the education I got in those 4 years. It was like a doctoral degree in policing. and then get reelected. That was a whole different story. But everything happens for a reason. Went into the private sector as a consulting, my own one-man consulting group, got the opportunity to work with a number of different corporations, municipalities, a wide spectrum of different types of interests. And then about a year and a half ago, I joined the team at USC at Saul Price School of Public Policy as director of the Safe Communities Institute, which is a think tank for public safety issues. And we provide mid-career level executive development training, and then senior level executive development training for public safety professionals. And we bring them in from around the country. We talk on a lot of different topics, and my goal there is to be able to work with my partner there, Jesse Red, who is a tremendous person, and put together the best and the brightest instructors we can find for their topic area from around the country, and to be able to provide the best training we can. And the results have been very good. It's a sought after number of courses that we provide, and we're always looking to expand our portfolio. One of the things I'm looking at doing there down the road is transitioning from the Safe Communities Institute into the Institute for National Security and Public Safety. So it would broaden the perspective of what we're focused on. We would modify our instructor cadre to be able to address issues from an international level, but to look more closely at transnational crime and the impact that's having on cities across America. I'll use fentanyl as an example. We're dealing with fentanyl, primarily from a local or state perspective with the officer on the street. They stop somebody, they find drugs, they arrest the person for the drugs. Many cases, the case doesn't get filed on, particularly today, and the person walks over and over again, hundreds of thousands of times a year. Is that an effective strategy for dealing with a drug problem that's killing 100,000 people a year in our country? I would argue no. But you look at, from a transnational crime perspective, that's a state actor, China, responsible for the shipment of precursor chemicals to fentanyl to Mexico, another state actor, who then the cartels there take it, make it into product, and then distribute it up through their narcotics network through street gangs, who ultimately kick up to prison gangs, the Mexican Mafia, the Nuestra Familia. So this is a multinational, a multi-level criminal enterprise that we're not dealing, other than what DEA is trying to do, not right. Dealing effectively, in my mind, with doing what needs to be done to put a halt to this. And so hopefully our goal is to bring more attention and ultimately more resources to the entities that can best deal with this type of problem, which are DEA at the operational level, State Department at the diplomatic level, but to be able to do things that need to be done to have a bigger impact than we're having currently on this. So it's very different to be in academia, looking at this from a different perspective, but hopefully still able to shape public policy in a fashion where we're helping the officers on the street, the people in our communities throughout the country.
Wow, that was amazing to just listen to all the things that you have done. It is amazing, and we're going to come back to the Safe Communities Institute here in a minute. I'm going to put you on the spot and just to the law enforcement career and say favorite position or rank. You choose. It may be two different things, but what was your favorite job? I think I know what the answer is, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think as a cop, I would say 77th homicide. I wasn't there for as long as many people who worked there at the time, who dedicated years and years of their life to a very challenging spot. But that time I did spend there, I value greatly in helping to form who I became down the road, hopefully as a police leader, but also just an appreciation for what the community deals with over and over again. And without public safety being strong and being responsive, how their life could deteriorate very quickly in so many of our communities. And then rank, I would say probably either as chief of police in Long Beach or as sheriff, in that ultimately you have the final say as to how your department delivers service, or at least you set the tone as best you can to be able to set realistic expectations, but set the bar high so that everybody knows what you're hoping for, what you hope to achieve, setting goals and a vision, and hopefully an implementation plan on how to get there, trying to be able to secure the appropriate funding, put academy classes in, and to be able to develop a well-run operation where people in the organization take great pride in what they do, and they deliver a service that is not just expected but exceptional. That's the hope and the goal. And I think when you get to the level of chief or sheriff, that you have an ability but a responsibility to be able to focus on the things that are most important to the people we're reporting to, the public, to work with all of those people in a positive way who can help us get the job done, and not to have an adversarial relationship with any of the people we need to be able to get the job done, elected officials, appointed officials, those people who have an ability to be able to be helpful. We want to bring them on the team, and we want to be able to ensure that we get the best we can get. I look at people say, why would you not want to go into the private sector much earlier in your career? And as beneficial as that has been to me from a standpoint of educational, there's nothing like the mission. When you're working for corporate America, you're working for the dollar. You're working for, ensuring that their business is successful. And that's great and that's important, but it doesn't feed you like the ability to be able to work toward a mission, a common goal, the safety of our communities, the safety of our police officers, our first responders, and ensuring that everybody is getting, as best you can provide, what they need to be able to do the job as well as it can be done.
Very nice. And I guessed 77th Homicide was going to get in there. Yes. Yeah. 77 special place. It just is. It was, and it is a special place in that, it drew a certain type of officer and detective to that division. That's all there is to it. And I mean, I wanted to go there badly. I did my probation in Foothill, and I put 77th, 77th, 77th as my top three, because I had friends and classmates that had worked there. And I look at that decision, and that might've been the best decision of my career, to go to 77th. And I remember people going, "You're going to go to 77? Why would you want to go there?" And it's like, you know why? I know why. It's because it was busy. You learned, and you were around people, like-minded people that really cared, really, really cared about their job and their profession, and putting bad guys in jail and solving cases. And it was what police work was all about. It was
exactly.
So I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. So let's get into some aviation stuff now. I mean, you were part of 3 different departments. All 3 departments had robust air support units in LAPD, the sheriffs, and Long Beach. As a leader, you were in a leadership position. How does air support, how does it fit into modern policing from your view and from your vast experience?
It's something that we take for granted. And yet the 3 departments that you mentioned, we've had air units for so long that we use them as just part of our patrol force. And we don't give probably enough thought to what a luxury it really is, because most departments in America don't have that luxury. That it's rare that they would be involved in the use of air assets for anything that they would be working on. So they work the way they do because they work with what they have. But in LA or Long Beach or the sheriffs, you have the ability to be able to just on a radio call request an air asset to your location, which in many cases will come within a minute. And you've got then high ground support and a platform, or an observation platform, to cover the roof lines, to be able to put together a quick perimeter from their perspective. The force multiplier that an air asset is to ground operations, I don't think can be overstated. You think about a pursuit that goes into a residential area or a business area. That suspect that may be wanted for shooting a police officer, shooting a member of the community, you don't want that suspect to get away. And you've got 3 or 4 cars involved in the pursuit, black and whites, and the suspect bails and gets out of the car running, or several suspects bail. If you have the air support unit above that area, the suspect is going to go to ground. They're going to find a place to hide. They know they don't want to be seen from the air, and that puts them in a position where their first goal is to hide. And by keeping that air unit rotating above that scene, you can put 4-point containment down on the ground with minimal number of officers to be able to contain those suspects within that perimeter, where otherwise they would clearly be gone. And if you were going to try and do that with just ground units, you would need 3 or 4 times as many ground units, which is not a reality, in order to prevent their escape. But the air unit above, until you can get canine assets in to be able to search out the location and find that suspect wanted for whatever that crime is, that is professional policing. It is smart policing. It gives you the ability to hold people accountable for the crimes that they've committed and be able to do it in a way that's most efficient, because you really can't shut down the rest of your division on one perimeter search, although often that pretty much happens. Yeah, bringing in outside resources to handle other important radio calls. But by using the air support asset, you minimize the number of units that have to be deployed on this particular case, and you're going to get a positive outcome in more cases than you ever would otherwise.
Yeah.
When you think about so many of particularly our violent crime suspects, if they get away from that, they're going to go out and probably do it again, probably hurt someone else again. There's a relatively small percentage of our community at all who are involved in any kind of violent criminal activity, but they do it over and over again. So to be able to invest the resources necessary to be able to hold people accountable for commission of violent crime really goes a long way to ensuring the safety of the community long term. And the message that it sends is we're taking this serious, and that what this person is alleged to have done is something that is an affront to the community, and the city is going to put the appropriate resources into it to ensure that it's resolved appropriately.
Well said. Well said. With all that, do you remember the first time that you had a helicopter come over you as a young patrol officer?
Yeah, I do. It was not something that where I came from in Boston that they used at all.
Right.
And it was something that at the time wasn't used in downtown LA very much because there were so many skyscrapers. But throughout the rest of the city, it was used extensively. And I remember requesting a helicopter for a perimeter, and it was there in no time, it seemed. And once it got up there, it was a total game changer in the ability to be able to coordinate that scene. Oftentimes, it's not the ground units that are coordinating the scene. It's the observer in the helicopter, the tactical flight officer, making sure that it's tight, because they can see things that certainly people on the ground can't. They see where there are holes in the perimeter. They see potential avenues of escape, and they seal those up. And without that help and support and perspective, we would not be as successful as we are.
Yeah. John, do you remember the first time an Able helicopter came over you in San Diego?
I do. And in fact, the first time was actually the San Diego County Sheriff. So Tony will ever be happy to hear that.
Oh, Tony's going to be thrilled to hear that.
But it was
Nick might not be happy about that, but Tony will be thrilled.
Yeah. What I recall, it was actually my third month of training, and I'm sure there had been other aircraft over calls prior to that, but it was over an officer-involved shooting that I was a part of, and I just that airship probably saved our life. Yeah. So that was my first impression of dealing with aircraft, and forever thankful, and that may have been part of the reason I ultimately went that way. But it's a game changer, absolutely. Maybe
it was Tony. That would be interesting to investigate.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got some friends down there in San Diego County. We'll have to investigate that, find out who that was.
Thank you to our sponsor, Quantum Helicopters. For over 2 decades, Phoenix PD, Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, Mesa PD, and the Pinell County Sheriff's Office in Arizona have trusted Quantum Helicopters for primary flight training. We've helped boost their efficiency, cut costs, delivered unmatched quality, and keep them focused on public safety. Don't just take our word for it. Reach out and see how we can deliver the same results for your agency. Visit quantumhelicopters.com to learn more.
I remember talking to a Santa Monica PD officer. They don't have air support, but if something big happened, Los Angeles, LAPD would support them. And if the sheriffs were around, they could support them. But I remember an officer down, and I met him in a class that I was teaching like 6 months later. He was still limping from his injury. And he grabbed me at a break and said, I got to tell you something. When I got shot and I went down, I wanted nothing more than to catch that guy that just did this to me. And I was hurting. And the first unit to arrive was an LAPD helicopter, and that night sun hit me. And he said, I cannot explain the feeling of that. I cannot explain it, but I'll just tell you that I knew everything was going to be okay. I knew I was going to be okay. And I knew that suspect didn't have a chance, that he was going to be contained, searched for, and caught. And he said, I swear that helped me get through that injury and that trauma, kept me from going into shock because of that, just them showing up with the light. And I stood there and went, wow, sometimes we forget the impact that we truly have. I mean, in your situation, John, obviously you felt that feeling as well. That's it can be very powerful. No doubt about it.
Yeah.
So Jim, in a leadership position, when it comes to air operations, I mean, it comes with a huge budget. Everybody knows that. And so how, as a leader, from your experience, did you deal with that in both managing that budget and dealing with the public or a city council or commissioners in saying, hey, do you really need that? And keeping that unit alive. Give us your perspective on that.
It's time for your Heli Life giveaway buzzword. Listen up and remember this word because you'll need it to enter for a chance to win exclusive Heli Life gear. Ready? This episode's buzzword is tactical. Visit contest.verticalhelicasts.com to enter the buzzword.
No, that's a great question because today, particularly with the budgets where they are, and people complain about the noise from the helicopters, and that's been something we've always had. And then others will talk about the budget and where maybe the opportunity cost, where could we put that money otherwise. What I found is the best way to be able to educate somebody who's, an activist, somebody who is not in support of the helicopter, somebody who's an elected official and wants to know more, is a ride-along, is get them up there and put them in, regular operations who are responding to radio calls in support of ground units. And that's a game changer. It's they see what's happening. They see how valuable it is. They see what you can see from up there that you would never see from the ground. And the types of activities, then somebody speeding, driving crazy, you'll see it from the helicopter and call in patrol units to stop that person that may prevent the death on the ground that nobody would have seen otherwise until it was too late. Over a crime scene, over a perimeter after pursuit. You could go on and on, checking the roofs on burglary calls, high ground positions. Search and rescue, just the myriad of things that air support is used for. I think when people see what happens and they become part of it, if you will, they have a whole different perspective and they value what the eye in the sky brings, and they would not have had that perspective otherwise. In today's environment, with the emergence of drone technology, UAS technology, I think we may see some transitions in that. We'll see certainly cities that previously couldn't afford an eye in the sky. Beverly Hills, Torrance are doing it exceptionally well. Chula Vista. Those are probably the top three I'm aware of that are effectively using it. Others are quickly getting into it. But they get that eye in the sky, if you will, the ability to be able to see something they otherwise wouldn't have. Yeah. But they don't have the benefit of a tactical flight operator or a pilot. Two police officers and what they bring to the table to direct ground resources at the end of an event, or to coordinate assets, ground assets, to be able to respond safely and effectively to something that's going on in the moment. And so while UAS activity, I think, will increase and is a great tool, I also would advocate for, particularly for those who can't afford it. And in many cases, as you mentioned, it's a regional asset. The Santa Monica situation you talked about, when any of our partner agencies have a dire need, there's no question about where you're going. You roll on it, you help out whoever you can. Crime or violence in progress, officer down, any of those kind of things. There's not a second thought given by anybody. Do I roll? Do I not? How do I help? You roll and you do the best you can with what you have. Drone technology, I mean, it will be helpful, but I don't see it replacing what we have with Air Support Division.
Yeah, we agree with that 100%. We agree. There's people that say, "Oh, you helicopter guys, you're afraid of the drone stuff, or you don't want it." No, we are advocates of it, and the people that we bring on the show that have a lot of experience in it, we have yet to come across somebody like with that attitude. Everybody thinks it's a great thing.
Yeah.
It just needs to be coordinated, and they need training and all that. I'll also add 2 other cities to your list, Jim: Redondo Beach and Santa Monica.
Okay,
they're really doing great things too.
Good.
They're launching from police stations and getting there first, just like a helicopter would. I've seen some of the video from both those agencies, and they're doing great stuff.
That's great.
It is truly, the future is here, and it's part of the policing plan now. No doubt about that. I don't want to put you on the spot too much here, but I know you're somewhat familiar with the LA City Controller's audit that came up. They were very, very, very critical of air support without explaining any of the benefits that you just listed and that we talk about all the time. And any thoughts on that?
You look at reports like this that come out, there's value to them because it makes you look at your operation. I
Agreed.
think a lot of times we take for granted what we have. We assume it's working right. We don't get the counter argument as to why do we do this? Why do we do that? So I think it's healthy to get a counterbalance sometimes. You would hope that counterbalance would be well informed and that the whoever's doing the report or the assessment would be an expert in that field. However, I think there's value even when you don't get that, but it has to be put in perspective. I think when somebody throws something at us that we're uncomfortable with, we need to take a look at it. We need to reevaluate and look at the way we're doing business. I don't think that's unhealthy at all.
I agree.
It's frustrating, certainly, and particularly if we don't believe that the report was done with as much insight as it could have had, or availed themselves to some resources they could have, and maybe gotten a different narrative from that. Yeah. But I still see great value in somebody taking a look at what we're doing and being critical of it. And if nothing else, if we're very comfortable in what we're doing, then we can defend our position, and I think that's a strong statement back to everybody who's going to have the opportunity to hear that side. And it gives us an opportunity we might not have had otherwise. But also then if we find that we're deficient in some way, or there's a better way to do something than we were doing it, then I would be thankful for that as well.
Yeah, I agree completely with every word you just said, because a couple things about this. I was, number one, really impressed with LAPD's response. It was they thought it out very carefully. They investigated things. They looked at things, and their response was very professional and very good. And were there things in that report that were true that they needed to change? Yep, there were. And that report, as flawed as it was in many ways, found a few things that air support is going to change. One of them was the log system. Air support's been fighting for a new log system to cover more of what they do and how they do it for a long time. And they've been told over and over, no, it costs too much money. Well, now this audit comes along, rips them apart about their log system. That's a good thing because now they're probably going to get a new log system. I mean, so you're right. There certainly was benefit, even though a lot of it was flawed. And it goes back to something you just talked about. Maybe a ride along would have helped that.
Yeah.
To whoever it is, whether it's the controller himself or the people that were doing the actual research and work, a ride along might have changed that whole dynamic. A simple 2.5 hours in the air. When you said that, I immediately thought, how many times did I have ride-alongs that came from the chief's office? And when we found out who they were, we went, this is not a pro-police person here, or this is not who you might think would be sent here by the chief's office. But yet we knew why. It was exactly what you talked about.
Right.
And we got to see firsthand that transition in their attitude about air support from 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
Just 2.5. And they left going, oh my goodness. So that's what you do. Yes. Every flight. That's what we do.
You think about it, we're all kind of victims of the news that we avail ourselves to. In today's environment where algorithms feed what you want to hear in too many cases, particularly on social media, but also on mainstream media, that people watch a certain type of news because they're comfortable with it, and then they only get one perspective. And I think we all need to be very careful about that. But likewise, just anybody, in the public who has an opinion on something based on what information they've had available to them, but without seeking out additional information, we all make snap judgments, and sometimes with very strong feelings. So we need to get out of our comfort zone and go and look at it more closely. And a lot of people aren't real comfortable in doing that because they feel that they won't be well received if they're bringing a different perspective. And that's kind of the world we live in now. But I think all of us have a responsibility to educate ourselves and to be able to get out there and avail ourselves to a counter narrative as much as we can, to be able to weigh it, see what we think of it, and is there some good to that? And if there is, incorporate that into our own thinking.
And I've witnessed you personally do that many times in many ways over the years. And you're still doing it. You're still doing it. And you're good at it. You're good at it. You represent law enforcement in such a good way. And you're not scared to talk to the people that don't like us or that have a view of us that isn't what we want. You've never backed down to that. And you come across so professionally and so knowledgeable that they leave, maybe didn't change their mind completely, but they leave with some respect, and they leave with an attitude, a slight attitude change at minimum, because you can do that really well. Not everybody can do that. I can't do that really well.
I think you do pretty well, Jack. Thank you.
I can try, but you're gifted at that. You're really good at it. Before we move to the next thing, John, anything else that's coming to your mind about the aviation side for Jim?
Well, we talked about the void of COVID and kind of what that brought out of the leadership topics, and then also the kind of the George Floyd episodes and what happened after that. And I feel like, from my perspective, aviation I expected aviation to take a hit as far as funding goes, but it seemed like the opposite happened. I think leaders found that aviation programs could accomplish a lot of what was being sought after with these reform movements. And it seems, from my perspective, and it seems today, that we're only growing stronger as a result of that. Are you seeing that from your perspective and the circles of conversation you're a part of?
I have not been part of a conversation where air assets were talked about in relation to the fallout from George Floyd or 2020 in general. But I think that certainly as a result of what happened there, and the recruitment and retention problems that we've had since then, and the reduction in deployments in cities across America, we have a greater, I think, responsibility to use those assets we have, the resources we have, to be able to work with our deployed resources, our patrol officers, our detectives, as best we can. And from a standpoint of agencies that have the luxury and privilege of having air assets, they certainly weigh heavily into being that force multiplier, getting the most bang for the buck we can out of the resources we have deployed, and to be able to do the job as well as we can. So I think that the value of air assets has been looked upon, maybe reevaluated and looked upon more favorably because of the lack of other personnel resources that we have available to us. So I think you're right that there probably has been a greater appreciation for air resources than we might have had when we had sufficient or at least greater resources on the ground.
Yeah. Good question, John. That's really, I agree with you. I think I was thinking that a lot of air units were going to disappear. I mean, completely, because you think about it. It's in my Daly's words, it's low hanging fruit. It's easy to say, we're just going to cut that. We're going to save $10 million or $48 million in the case of LAPD. But what do you lose by doing that? you lose a lot, and it's a lot more than the average person understands. Even the average police officer maybe doesn't appreciate it.
Right.
All three of us are very lucky in that we all agree. We took it for granted. We had air units at the agencies we worked at, and you didn't think twice about it. But most officers do not have that. The vast majority of police officers in the United States don't have that, and we're very lucky. We're very lucky, and it helped us. It kept us safe. Made us more effective. It made us more efficient. There's a long list of things that it did, but we kind of take it for granted because it's always been there.
Yeah.
You know? You expect it.
Yeah.
And when they're not there, you're going, hey, what the heck?
Yeah.
Where are these guys? I don't care that it's lightning and thundering out. Where are these guys?
Yeah. So if that report you mentioned or others cause us to reevaluate the value of air assets to us, I think we all benefit from that.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I think when you look at lethal force encounters in law enforcement and you compare that to law enforcement or aviation programs, you can see that the impact that aviation programs have on the reduction of lethal force encounters. You talked about pursuits. How many times a suspect bails out of a car, runs down an alley, turns a corner, and waits for that officer to come back and round that corner, and lethal force encounter takes place.
Right.
Whereas if you have an aviation unit overhead, sees that, calls them out, sets a perimeter, it takes that lethal force encounter out of the equation. This is kind of what I see the reformists wanting to happen. They want to see a reduction in these lethal force encounters, and the aviation programs provide that. So I think that's huge, so.
Thanks to our sponsor, Airbus. Airbus provides the most efficient helicopter solutions to its customers who serve, protect, and save lives and safely carry passengers in demanding environments. Its civil and military helicopters are flying all over the world, making missions possible. Visit airbus.com for more information.
I can't think of how many times over the years I've been involved in scenes where the air unit, the tactical flight officer, will be yelling at the ground units, "Do not go down that alley. Stay out of the alley. Stay." Or line of fire issues, or a suspect waiting to ambush somebody who comes around that corner, that clearly saved lives. And had it not been for that word from the sky, you would have gone down that alley and walked right into an ambush, or driven into the line of fire of another unit stopping a vehicle.
Yeah. It happens over and over, all the time. It's just amazing how often, more often than we're happy about.
Yeah.
But the fact that they're there, it changes things. There's no doubt about it. So as you know, we're getting tight on time, but I want to ask you about a couple more things. You have a lot of leadership experience. I mean, a lot in a whole variety of units, and I mean, a sheriff, a chief, an assistant chief, as you were a sergeant. I mean, all those leadership experience. I want you to think about that and tell us what your perspective is and what you think are some key elements to being a successful leader, particularly in today's policing world. In the world of 2024, what are the key elements in being a successful leader?
And when you talk about leader and leadership, I don't think it comes attached to a rank, certainly.
Agreed.
I think everyone's a leader. Every time you go to work and you're put in a position of responsibility for yourself and others, you're a leader. Whether you want to accept that or not is a different story. But whether you're leading yourself, your partner, you're going into a scene of a chaotic incident, a shooting or whatever, you're leading those people to safety. You're leading them in a way that they're following you because of that uniform, that badge, that responsibility that you've been given, and that people accept, particularly in times of trouble and being involved in a chaotic incident. And so people defer to you that you're going to know what to do and that you're going to do something. I think a big part of that is doing something, making a decision. Too often we see people in leadership roles who are so hesitant to make a decision that nothing ends up happening, or somebody else ends up taking the responsibility for doing it eventually. But during that time, things are happening, and so in a dynamic situation, and happening very, very quickly. So I think making sure that you're ready to make a decision if you take a responsibility and accept that rank or that position or whatever it is you're doing, that role that you're playing, that you're willing to make a decision that is going to be the best decision you can make based on the facts you have available to you at the time, that if you have the time to seek guidance or input from people more knowledgeable, that you seek that out. That's critical. You get other perspectives. You just don't go in with what you know and hope that that works for every situation. It won't. I think being confident in what you bring to the table, but being humble in your approach, because none of us know it all. Every one of us needs others to be able to help make our situation successful, ourselves successful. And so I look at what we teach our people in the academy about command presence, that you want to be able to have a presence about you so that when you go into a chaotic situation, you're able to bring some order to that chaos, even if you're greatly outnumbered. And the uniform appearance that we talked about earlier is part of that. How you carry yourself, your control over you is a big part of that. But there's a fine line between command presence and arrogance, or the perception of arrogance by those that you're dealing with. And so that's where the humility piece comes in very, very importantly. And I think that to get that balance takes years of experience. You really can't teach that, but we can talk about it more than we do, so that people have an awareness of how they may be perceived if they do X, Y, and Z. That's something that is part of the tactical package that is, I think, under-addressed. And we need to work at that much more intently, because it is part of the tactics that we present. I think in the big picture, know why you're there. Be confident, but be humble at the same time. You're there to look out for your people. You're given responsibility over a certain number of people to be able to perform duties that achieve a goal in the long run, accomplish a mission. In order to do that, you've got to do it through others. You can't do it on your own. And those others are looking to you for leadership, for guidance, for support, for motivation. They're looking for you to be the full package that they want to see out there in any leader. They want you to have integrity. They want you to be tactically competent. They want to know that you know what you're doing and you care about them, and you're looking out for their well-being and their safety. They know that they're going in harm's way, but they want to make sure that they're being deployed as responsibly as they can, and that there's somebody, their supervisor, their manager, that has a keen interest in making sure that they go home safe that night. Somebody who cares about the mission, somebody who cares about the community, somebody who's not just paying lip service to the values that we talk about. And nobody's better than cops for seeing through a fraud, a phony. Mm-hmm. They know if you care or if you don't care. They know your attitude. And as a leader, you're on stage all the time, on duty, off duty. What you say, what you tacitly allow to happen, that becomes who you are and the tone you set. You've got to be who you are. You got to be real, and you got to be full time. And I think that's sometimes people leave and they let their hair down and they become someone else off duty than they were on duty, or even on duty, they say things under their breath, or they have a different personality or attitude when people are watching than when they're not. And as a good leader, you can't do that. You have to be who you are, be real, and that's what it comes down to. And I think ultimately just staying positive. And that is so hard in a very difficult environment that we're living in today, is to stay positive, because that is infectious. And if you're negative and you come to work negative and you're talking badly about things or people all the time, then that's the message you're sending to your folks. And that's what they're taking then onto the street, onto each radio call they go to. You got to stay above it. You got to stay positive. You got to stay realistic. I mean, not Pollyannish positive, but realistic, and try and find the good in whatever it is that you're doing. And that's not always easy. That's a challenge for any leader today or ever. But putting all of that together in a package is like playing golf. It's a bunch of little things that come together. And if you can put it all together, then you're going to be more successful than somebody who's not able to do that. But as we started out this conversation, leadership is not a grand vision or a grand motion. It's a series of incremental steps that are taken in every breath you take, in how you carry yourself and how you approach people, how you deal with people, whether or not you care about what you're talking about. All of those things coming together as one really translates into the level of leadership that you're able to exert over any situation. When you don't know something, telling people, I'm not sure. That's not my field. I don't know that. I need help from somebody who's more knowledgeable on that. You look at policing today, there has never been more complex job that we're given to somebody who's 21, 22, 23 years old. And we train them for 6 months with whatever we can jam into their head in the academy. And they're on the street then, and they've got a training officer a period of time. And after that, they don't. And they're out there either with a partner or by themselves. And any problem society can throw their way, they're going to handle. And we've conditioned society, if there's a problem you can't handle, dial 911 and we'll roll somebody 24/7. And that person gets to the scene and they're expected to be right 100% of the time.
Yeah.
And is that reasonable? Probably not, but that's what the job is.
Yeah.
And they will be evaluated and reevaluated on whatever course of action they take or don't take, maybe for the rest of their life in some corners, but certainly from an accountability standpoint, that body-worn camera, that the videotapes that are available in the environment, they will be looked at by others judging their performance or behavior in slow motion over and over again in some cases, and they'll come up with whatever their finding is. But the person in the instant had seconds in some cases or less to make a decision and do what they do. And the stakes could not be higher in many cases. So we ask an awful lot, but this is not any job. This is a special job, a special profession that we've got, hopefully, and will continue to have the best and brightest that are attracted to this field, willing to pin on that badge and go out there and put it all on the line on behalf of people they've never met. That's an exceptional quality.
Jim, thank you for that. That didn't surprise me at all. Your response to that was fantastic, and that really covered a lot about leadership. And I love that you started with that it's not about rank, because it isn't. Everybody's in that position at some point. You might not be in a full-time leadership position, but as a police officer, you are looked at as a leader in some form, whether it's your peers or from the public, regularly.
Yeah.
And we all have people that we can think of where you go, wow, that's one of the best leaders I've ever been around. And they're police officer rank. One that comes into mind, I have to say it, RJ Cottle.
Yeah.
RJ Cottle. I mean, for those that don't know, RJ was killed in Afghanistan as a Marine, as a sergeant major in the Marines. But he was also an element member in SWAT, an element leader in SWAT. And I was around RJ, not as much as SWAT guys, of course, but I was around him enough to know that dude. I'd follow that guy anywhere.
Yeah.
Because he was a leader. He did all the things that you talked about. That was RJ Cottle. And you just but then I also think of other people that were in leadership yourself. Mike Hillman, Bob Green. These are names that pop into my head that very well. They were leaders, and they had the traits that you're talking about. So I love that you started it by talking about rank, because we all have to look in the mirror and say, hey, we need to get to that level of confidence and abilities to be that leader. Even if we don't have stripes or bars or stars, we all become leaders at some point. Wow. Very, very good. I'm glad we talked about that. Let's talk as we finish up here. Let's talk about one more thing.
Sure.
Let me ask you first at the Safe Communities Institute, which part of it is a think tank, is the topic of retention and recruitment. Is that something that you're talking about?
Yeah.
And if so, tell us your thoughts on that, where we're at, because every guest we have on, this comes up.
Yeah.
Every single one. I mean, recently, Helen Balmer from Phoenix PD. Phoenix PD is at half strength right now. Half strength. How do you do that? And her response was, because we got some really good cops that are out there working. And that's why that city's not burning down.
That's great.
But retention and recruitment is a very important thing. So give us your thoughts and perspective on that, and where you think it's going.
To start off with a positive, we are in a bad place as it relates to deployment, but we still have some unbelievable people who go out there and do it every day. And if they were at quarter strength, they'd still be doing the best they could every day to try and help keep our community safe. So we start with the foundation of we have good people, and we have overall, I'd say, a very good culture and a good mission. The downside is that when 2020 came along and we went through what was viewed by many as the demonization of the profession, where no matter what you did, you felt you couldn't get a break, and were held to a standard that was not realistic. Many people in the profession decided, okay, without the public support, I can't function the way we have, and I'm going to retire. And many retired earlier than they normally would have, and that caused a brain drain within the field, within the profession. So tremendous experience went out the door that you can't replace by putting another body in that position, because it's not the same body, not the same level of expertise and experience. And so much of what we do can only be learned by doing it, by having been through the hard times and doing the investigations and learning the hard way on many things. That is often the best lesson. So from a retention standpoint, we talk about it at the field level, the detective level, but it was every bit as every bit as hard at the senior executive level, because we what we saw across the country were chiefs of police retired, but then not only their number 2 or 3 or 4, they also retired. So where we had done some succession planning and the next chief was going to be one of these 3 people after a competitive process, those people were all gone too. And they all went into private sector and are doing whatever they're doing and probably doing very well. But they're not where they were expected to be at that point in the evolution of leadership in that department. So that is a big gap for somebody who is several levels down to get promoted into the chief executive spot. There's a process that usually goes into that, where you're exposed to a number of different things at each step of the way. And sadly, some of our senior leaders in American policing didn't have the benefit of being able to do that. No fault of their own. They just were thrust into the senior leadership role prior to when that would have otherwise occurred. So we have to work at that, and we have to mentor our leaders across this nation as well, and not assume that because they have that rank, they are equipped with the tools that maybe their predecessors might have had. And then from a recruitment standpoint, our best recruiters are our own people. And right now, our own people are telling their friends, relatives, sons and daughters and neighbors, this is not the profession to come into. The support that's necessary is not there, and they're going then into other professions. The downside to that is that if we're still filling academy classes, are they the same caliber as we might have had 5 years ago, 10 years ago? I don't have an answer for that, but my fear is that are we going to jeopardize standards in order to get bodies into the academy? And that is not an easy, it's an easy knee-jerk answer to say, oh, absolutely not. But the reality is that you've got to fill those spots. You've got to get people in the field to do the job, because lives are at stake. So how do we best deal with that? And we need to talk a lot more than we have been about where do we go from here, because we need the very best and brightest our society has to offer who are willing to do this job and come in and make it a career. So the retention issue, critical. The recruitment issue, every bit as critical, because we're looking at the next generation and generations of police officer that are going to be shaping and forming our communities in ways that without public safety as a great foundation, that community will never be what it otherwise would have been. And I don't think that can be stressed enough, that what we're talking about here is not just policing in one profession in a silo. It is society that we're talking about, and the impact that public safety and the perception of public safety has on any viable community.
That's a perfect way to sum it up. Very, very well done. And I'm glad we talked to you about that, Jim. It's a hot topic.
Yeah.
You know, everybody's doing more with less, and you know, as the ranks dwindle and the experience goes away, crime has gone up, and now you're stuck and you're trying to right the ship, and it's not going to be an overnight thing for sure. Right. It's going to be a long process. Mm-hmm. But I've loved your perspective on that.
Well, thanks.
John, as we're wrapping things up, anything on your mind for Jim before we let him go? He's been very nice with his time here for us.
Yeah, man, there's actually a ton, but in the interest of time, I'll skip that. But I do want to thank you for coming on, for the influence you've got over shaping the culture of law enforcement, not just in Southern California, but worldwide. It's obvious through the conversation we've had today that you've put a lot of time and effort into the thought process that goes into all the things we're talking about. So the success you had is obviously not a result of an accidental sequence of events. You've done this with intention, and I thank you for that. We need people like you in these positions of leadership to help guide these agencies as we go forward. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for your leadership.
Thanks for the opportunity and for what you're doing and shining a light on the great profession that we've been privileged to be part of in so many different perspectives. You have high ground, and literally and figuratively, and you're sharing that with everybody else who watches the podcast. So thank you for that service you're providing.
Thank you, Jim.
John's done great creating this this podcast, and we're just thrilled that you agreed to come on and join us. And I want to start with my closing and saying thank you, John McGinty, for getting for arranging a place to stay for Jim McDonnell. Who would have known that it started with John saying, we can find a place for you here. Oh my gosh. That is so great. That is so great. So Jim, in closing, I just want to thank you personally for taking the time. I know you're a busy man and you've got lots of things going on, but the fact that you were willing to take time for us is much appreciated by me personally. I know firsthand what kind of leader you are. I'm honored that I got to be a part of that. I'm so glad that our paths were almost identical. Came on a few years after you, but I got to see all the things that you talked about. And I will tell our listeners, this man doesn't just talk. He walks everything he talked about today. He walks it. He did it for real. He does it for real. He's a true leader, and I have a lot of respect for him. And Jim's just a great guy. So that just makes it all the better, because there's some leaders that are really good leaders. They aren't so great when you talk around them and talking to them. Jim's the whole package. And so Jim, thank you very much for joining the Hangar Z.
Absolutely.
It was great to see you too.
Likewise.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up. Wish we had more time. Who knows? We may come up with some more topics and have Jim back at some point. That would be great. Thanks again, John. Good seeing you today. And to our listeners, thanks for listening and watching. We really appreciate it. Thanks to all our sponsors, MHM Publishing, for making this happen. John and I feel very lucky that we're able to do interviews like this.
Yeah, it's great.
So we'll wrap it up and just say cheers, everybody. Talk to you soon.
Cheers.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Hangar Z Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that promote the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Lastly, stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors. Cheers.
Thanks to our sponsor, Airbus. Airbus provides the most efficient helicopter solutions to its customers who serve, protect, and save lives and safely carry passengers in demanding environments. Its civil and military helicopters are flying all over the world, making missions possible. Visit airbus.com for more information.
Thank you to our sponsor, Quantum Helicopters. For over 2 decades, Phoenix PD, Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, Mesa PD, and the Pinal County Sheriff's Office in Arizona have trusted Quantum Helicopters for primary flight training. We've helped boost their efficiency, cut costs, delivered unmatched quality, and keep them focused on public safety. Don't just take our word for it. Reach out and see how we can deliver the same results for your agency. Visit quantumhelicopters.com to learn more.
Thanks to our sponsor, Summit Aviation, a full-service provider for business, government, parapublic, and military aviation, specializing in maintenance, modifications, avionics, interiors, and paint. Discover more at summit-aviation.com.
Thank you for joining us on the Hangar Z Podcast and for supporting the sponsors who make these conversations possible. This is the first recording that will be part of an ongoing series on leadership. We felt that this conversation is vital because effective leadership serves as the foundation for successful operations within law enforcement, particularly in specialized fields like aviation. Leadership development is crucial in fostering a culture of accountability, resilience, and innovation, which are essential in navigating the complex challenges faced by law enforcement and public safety aviation today. By exploring various perspectives and insights from experienced and effective leaders like Jim McDonnell, we aim to highlight the significance of empowering and motivating current and future leaders with the tools and knowledge they need to support their teams effectively. The Conversations on Leadership not only emphasizes the necessity of effective leadership, but also underscores the critical impact that well-developed leaders can have on officer well-being, community relations, and overall mission success. As we delve deeper into the intricacies of leadership, we hope to inspire and equip listeners with actionable strategies that can lead to meaningful change within their organizations and the communities they serve.